I want to point out this is a scene with Mrs. Voss is one of the few people of color in this graphic novel. She's in the foreground, and she's not taking precedence. These two small characters right here, they are not major characters. They show up for a few pages, but look at the text that goes on. This is the idea of that conservative populism is growing during the Obama administration. This is volume 4. We are well into the Obama administration when this happened. And it starts, and I apologize for the language. How does a fucking African who went to a church saying 9/11 was vengeance on the white man, how does that guy wind up telling me that I got to pay for someone else's health care? As much as this is a moment of hope, we see that these roots of hatred are happening on the outside, right? Mrs. Voss is our focus, but these two guys are considered the other. There is something going on between these characters. Monster Theory's comments on white privilege. Tyler and Kinsey, the brother and sister, find something called a race key. They're able to change their race on a moment's notice. And notice that President Obama is, there's an cable news segment about President Obama, and in the foreground, Tyler and Kinsey are talking about, Tyler says, they're looking for 2 black kids, so that's good. And Kinsey responds, that's a good thing? Really? 2 men get killed for who are cops gonna blame for it? A couple of black kids. Same as always, alright? Monsters are never created ex nihilo, but as a process of fragmentation and recombination in which the elements are extracted from various forms, including, indeed, marginalized social groups. Cohen's talking about that directly. Kritzman, in representing the monster, talks about the idea of the monstrous being from a different set of the normal. A visual effect to the rarity of the object of the gaze. We have the race key is actually a form of a mirror. We see the whiteness transform into a person of color in that moment. Is that sense of otherness, all right? Christman also uses the word cripple for his analysis, talking about the idea that there's something less than in those moments, all right? The race mirror forms a black like me element that adds to the element of the fantastic. Let's see. I want to talk finally about the gender identity and the villain. Lucas originally before turning to Dodge, was presenting as male, was actually one of the heroic characters. But when Lucas is infected through the object that are in the keys, we see that Lucas chooses the form of the female identity, the woman in the well. Dodge, again, this female form of Lucas, elicits sympathy. She's stuck in a well, and Bodhi has to get her out. This kind of mirrors the Spider-Woman narrative and the fear of the female taking charge. We see this innocent woman in the well, only to realize there's something far more sinister to the woman, which may kind of predict the Hillary Clinton election later on. We see Lucas, before turning to Dodge, get the idea from a transgender character. Rendell, who is Tyler's father, has a little brother who likes to dress up as a little girl from time to time and play. This character would later be a homosexual character as an adult, but really we see this perversion of the transgender mythos here by the villain mimicking Duncan. All right? And the second that Dodge enters the picture and Lucas decides to take advantage of this, Dodge stresses the sexuality of her body, right? She uses all these other characters for their sexuality, and that fear of womanhood, the fear of the strong woman, kind of is played out through that idea that conservative populism is coming through, right? The fear of the woman taking charge, the fear of transgender characters tricking heterosexual characters into a sexual dominance area, all right? Hill is very progressive, but I think he's stressing the fears of what's going on in culture. Will someone make me gay is, I think, that idea. In Kathleen Perry Long's Hermaphrodites Newly Discovered, she says that given the coexistence of 2 genders in one person, the notion of one gender as the true sex is canceled out. Lucas isn't Lucas anymore. He is Dodge. Dodge is Lucas. Neither one has a full persona, and that's kind of commenting on the idea of what do we think of someone who can change genders back and forth. In the case of Long, she's talking about hermaphrodites, but the same thing kind of applies. I want you to focus, this is my conclusion, I want you to focus on how Tyler looks on the last pages of the book. Tyler goes from being this kind of redneck fisherman, and I apologize for the word redneck, but I think that's used inside the text, to educated. He has abandoned his life of simplicity and lack of education, and goes to college. He dresses up in a nice shirt, wears glasses, abandons the fisherman's hat, and realizes I can't abandon Lucas or Dodge. Even though Lucas and Dodge are the villains, they are the representation of the worst of conservative populism. He doesn't use violence. He says, I have to save this person. All right? The fantastic monsters are ignored here, and we see Lucas as just a soaking wet kid in the well. And Lucas realizes that it is the way of the open mind to abandon violence and to save Lucas. Yes, this ends up killing Lucas in the long run, but it's not through violence. It's through an ending to the story. Here's my works cited page. If you have any questions, I will be hopefully posting a link to the slides. I used a lot of these as inspiration of how to address monsters within the story. But I'd like to thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope to hear back from you soon. Thank you.